Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed on the most captivating topics. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest mysteries of our digital age. Large language models. They can write, they can reason, they can even seem to, think like us, achieving results that, frankly, often feel like magic.
They really do.
But for all their power, they can also feel like a big, opaque black box.
It's true. It's like seeing the grand finale of a magic show, but you're left wondering, oh, how was the illusion actually pulled off?
Exactly. So our mission today is to peek behind that curtain, to look inside the brain of these LLMs.
Right.
We're going to focus on their fundamental building blocks, the attention heads. We're not just going to tell you what they do,
Right.
but we'll uncover how they do it, and perhaps most importantly, why understanding this matters to you.
And the insights we're drawing from today, they come from some really cutting-edge research that synthesizes the latest findings on attention head interpretability. Our focus is on current mainstream LLM architectures, particularly those with a decoder-only structure.
Right.
So think popular models like Llama and GPT.
Gotcha. Not the older BERT stuff.
Exactly. We'll be setting aside older studies related to BERT-based models as the field has, well, it's evolved quite a bit since then.
And here's where this deep dive gets truly exciting. The research introduces this innovative four-stage framework, and it actually maps LLM reasoning to human cognitive processes. This framework is going to be our guiding light as we explore the inner workings of these powerful models.
It's a really helpful analogy.
So before we jump into those fascinating four stages, let's maybe establish a basic understanding of what we're looking at. Imagine an LLM not as like a single thing, but as a sophisticated layered structure.
That's a great way to put it. At a high level, a model like this consists of an embedding layer, then followed by many identical transformer layers stacked on top of each other, and finally an unembedding layer. When you give the model input, say a sentence, each word or piece of a word, what we call a token, first goes through semantic embedding and positional encoding.
Right.
Think of this as giving each token its meaning and its location in the sentence. That turns it into the initial input for the very first transformer layer.
And it's inside each of those transformer layers that we find these crucial attention heads. How do they actually function at a foundational level? What are they doing with all this encoded information?
Well, each attention head has a very specific job. It processes information using 4 specialized mathematical structures called low-rank matrices.
Low-rank matrices, okay.
Yeah, you can think of these matrices as highly efficient filters. They allow the head to derive what are called query, Q, key K, and value V matrices.
Right, Q, K, V, I've heard those terms.
Exactly. The core function then involves calculating attention scores between different tokens using the query and key matrices. This is where the model essentially asks, how relevant is this token to that token? These scores are then combined with the value matrix, which carries the actual content or information.
So it's like they're constantly asking questions, comparing information, and then deciding what pieces of information are most important to pay attention to.
Precisely. And all of this information processing happens within what's called the residual stream.
Residual stream, okay.
Imagine this as a shared information highway that runs through the entire model. Lower layers or earlier tokens write information onto this stream, and higher layers or subsequent tokens read it. The QK mechanism enables a head to read information from this stream by computing those attention scores.
Right.
While the OV mechanism is responsible for writing processed information, new insights, or refined data back into it.
So these attention heads are like mini processors constantly reading and writing information on this shared data stream.
Yeah.
That's a powerful analogy.
It is.
It really starts to demystify what's happening inside.
Definitely helps.
This is where the human analogy truly comes into play. The research proposes this 4-stage framework for LLM reasoning, inspired directly by cognitive neuroscience and psychology. It's like discovering that an LLM's problem-solving process isn't so different from how our own brains might tackle a challenge.
What's truly fascinating is how studies have indeed observed striking parallels. LLMs have been shown to mirror human metacognition.
Thinking about thinking.
Exactly. Exhibiting context-sensitive reasoning patterns and even showing a modular organization similar to how different regions of our brain specialize.
Wow.
We've even seen memory characteristics like primacy and recency effects in how LLMs process information, where they remember things better at the beginning or end of a sequence.
Just like us.
It strongly suggests a deeper, shared computational logic that goes beyond just mere pattern matching.
Okay, let's jump into the first stage then. Knowledge recalling, or KR.
Right. So in a human, this is like when you recall common sense or specific expertise from your memory to solve a problem. For an LLM, it's about attention heads retrieving parametric knowledge. This is the vast amount of knowledge the model learned during its training phase, which is essentially embedded within its internal parameters.
Right, baked in.
Exactly. These heads make initial guesses or associations based on the current context, and then inject this memory, this foundational information, into the residual stream.
So what kinds of specialized attention heads are performing this crucial first step? Are there different types?
Yeah, we see a few key types. There's the memory head, which is adept at storing and retrieving associative memories, helping the model link relevant info to useful memories as it processes more complex ideas.
Okay.
You also have the constant head, often found in multiple choice question answering, or MCQA tasks. This head generates uniformly distributed attention scores across all options, sometimes acting as a baseline or a default attention.
Interesting. And you mentioned a negative one.
Yes, and in binary decision tasks, a negative head can actually bias attention towards negative answers, reflecting a prior bias the model might have learned during training. The core insight here is that LLMs aren't just generating text from scratch. They have dedicated units to recall internal facts and general knowledge to kickstart their reasoning process.
Building on that, let's explore the second stage, in-context identification, or ICI. This sounds like the model is now starting to grasp the specific details of the problem at hand.
Exactly.
Rather than just pulling up general knowledge.
Precisely. For us, this is about quickly picking up on key pieces of information when reading a problem statement, whether it's structural layout, grammatical patterns, or the core meaning.
Right.
In an LLM, attention heads use their QK mechanisms to focus on and identify information within the current context of the prompt you've given it, and then they write this identified information into the residual stream via their OV mechanisms. It's about discerning what's important right now.
What kind of information are these heads adept at identifying? What are the key categories here?
There are three main areas, really. First, overall structural information identification. Here, heads like the previous head and positional head capture relationships within token sequences, like understanding current and previous token embeddings. There's also the rare words head that surprisingly focuses on lowest frequency or unique tokens, and the duplicate head that captures repeated content.
And you mentioned something about long texts.
Yes, a truly vital one, especially for very long texts, is the global retrieval head. It's responsible for what's often called the needle in a haystack capability.
Right, finding that one specific piece of info.
Exactly. It's remarkably good at locating specific tokens efficiently within vast amounts of text. This tells us LLMs have specialized search engines built right into their architecture.
That makes sense. And what about understanding the nuances of language itself,
Yeah.
like grammar?
That falls under syntactic information identification. The syntactic head, for example, identifies and labels grammatical components like subjects, objects, or modifiers within a sentence.
Okay.
The subword merge head is quite fascinating. It merges tokenize or split subwords like happy and moodiness back into complete words.
So it puts words back together.
Precisely, showing its role in reconstructing full words for meaning. Then we have the mover head cluster, which are kind of like argument parsers.
Mover heads.
Yeah. These often copy or transfer important information to the ND position. This is a special token that marks the final answer or prediction slot for the model.
Oh, I see.
Examples include the name mover head and backup name mover head, which literally move names to end, or the letter mover head, which aggregates first letters.
And there's a negative one, too.
On the flip side, the negative name mover head works to prevent name information from being transferred, ensuring the right information gets through, or perhaps that irrelevant info doesn't.
That's incredibly detailed, showing how granular their understanding can be. Okay, and the third category for identification.
That's semantic information identification. This is where the model grasps meaning. The context head extracts task-relevant information. The content gatherer head moves tokens related to the correct answer to that ND position, preparing for output.
Setting up the answer.
basically. We also see the sentiment summarizer, which summarizes sentiment-expressing adjectives and verbs near a CM position, another special token used for summarization, usually placed before the any dogen.
Okay.
And for capturing deeper semantic relationships, there's the semantic induction head, which understands relationships like part, whole, usage, and category instance. Finally, the subject head and relation head focus on identifying and injecting subject and relation attributes into the residual stream. What's clear here is that LLMs aren't just guessing meaning. They have dedicated internal machinery that actively identifies different facets of language, from grammar to sentiment, and places that crucial information where it's needed next.
Okay, that's a lot of meticulous identification.
Right.
So stage 1 was recalling. Stage 2 is identifying within the context. Now for the third stage, latent reasoning, or LR. This feels like the actual thinking part, right? Where all that identified information gets put to work.
It absolutely is. This is the core of problem solving for both humans and LLMs. It's about synthesizing the gathered information and performing logical reasoning.
In an LLM, the QK mechanisms perform implicit reasoning based on information they've read from the residual stream, and then the results of that reasoning are written back into the residual stream through the OV mechanisms. This is where the internal aha moments happen, so to speak.
So what kinds of reasoning processes do we observe here? What's going on?
We can break it down. First, there's in-context learning. This includes task recognition, TR, where the LLM uses its prior knowledge to interpret demonstrations, like understanding that positive or negative examples are about sentiment, because it has internalized these concepts during pre-training.
It recognizes the pattern.
Right.
Right.
Then there's task learning, TL, which is tougher because it requires the model to learn a novel mapping function from examples that lack an inherent semantic connection. It has to figure out a new rule on the fly.
We also see the induction head, which strictly follows identified patterns and can complete fill-in-the-blank reasoning based on those patterns. And the in-context head calculates the similarity between information at the ND position and different labels, extracting and weighting label features to determine the final answer.
Are there specific heads responsible for the quality of this reasoning? Like making sure it's accurate or consistent?
Yes, absolutely. That's under effective reasoning. We have the truthfulness head, accuracy head, and consistency head, which are highly correlated with truthful, accurate, and consistent answers.
Right.
Researchers have even found that modifying these can actually enhance an LLM's reasoning abilities.
Really? You can tweak them?
Yeah, to some extent. Conversely, there's a vulnerable head, which is overly sensitive to specific input norms and can lead to incorrect results. Minimizing its influence is important for robust performance. It's fascinating to think of these as internal quality control mechanisms.
Wow. Okay, and finally, task-specific reasoning.
Correct. These heads specialize for particular kinds of problems. In MCQA tasks, the correct letterhead matches the inferred answer text to the option letters for the final choice.
Connecting the answer text to the A, B, C, D.
Precisely. For sequential data, the iteration head iteratively infers the next intermediate state, like solving a step-by-step problem. And for arithmetic problems, the successor head performs increment operations on ordinal numbers.
Like counting.
Essentially, yeah. This whole stage really highlights that LLMs don't just reason generally. They seem to have highly specialized circuits for different kinds of logical operations.
So the LLM has recalled knowledge, meticulously identified context, and reasoned through it. Now, for the fourth and final stage, expression preparation, or EP, this is about getting the answer out into the world, right? Making it make sense.
Exactly. This is where the LLM aligns its internal reasoning results with the desired verbal expression. During this stage, attention heads work to aggregate information, amplify key signals, and ensure the final output aligns with the original instructions or format.
How do they go about aggregating all that information from the previous stages? Sounds complicated.
Well, that falls under information aggregation. The mixed head, for instance, can linearly combine and aggregate information from both the in-context identification, ICI, and latent reasoning, LR stages.
Pulling it all together.
Exactly. Pulling together outputs from subject heads, relation heads, or induction heads. These aggregated results are then written back into the residual stream and ultimately mapped to vocabulary logits.
Logits, right? The probabilities for words.
Which are essentially the model's probabilities for each word in its vocabulary, yes.
Okay. And for making sure the right answer really stands out, especially in like a multiple choice scenario.
That's signal amplification. Heads, like the amplification head and correct head, amplify the signal of the correct choice letter in MCQA problems, especially near that in-ND position.
Ah, so it cranks up the volume on the right answer.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This ensures that after all the final processing, the correct choice letter has the highest probability of being selected and delivered to you.
Finally, what about ensuring the output makes linguistic sense? Or adheres to a specific format or language, like coherence?
That's instruction alignment. The coherent head ensures linguistic consistency in generated content, which is particularly important in multilingual tasks, making sure the language flows naturally.
Yeah.
And the faithfulness head is associated with the faithfulness of chain of thought reasoning.
Making sure the explanation matches the answer.
Essentially, yeah. Ensuring the model's generated response accurately reflects its internal reasoning process, confirming that the output is consistent with the model's internal thought process.
Got it.
It's worth noting, though, for simpler tasks, LLMs might actually skip this expression preparation stage entirely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they might directly output information from the ICI and LR stages if the task is straightforward enough. No need for the final polish.
This is where it really comes alive for me. It's not just about what each attention head does in isolation. It's about how they dance together, how they collaborate to solve a problem.
Indeed, these stages often involve complex interactions, and what's fascinating is that layers can even return to earlier stages if needed.
Like loops.
Kind of, yeah, forming iterative loops of reasoning. We can truly understand this choreography by looking at specific problem-solving scenarios.
Give us an example. How would an LLM solve a multiple choice question step by step with these heads?
Okay, consider a typical multiple choice question answering MCQA problem. Initially, the model internally infers the correct answer in its text form, maybe through KR and LR stages.
Right.
Then, in the ICI stage, the content gatherer head identifies this inferred answer text and literally moves its tokens to the ND position, preparing it,
Puts it in the answer slot.
basically.
Yeah.
Subsequently, in the LR stage, the correct letterhead uses this gathered information. Its internal query vector essentially asks, "Are you the correct label?" And the key vector responds, "I'm choice ABCD," with the corresponding text.
Wow.
This precise matching process then determines the final correct answer choice. It's a very direct handoff of information between specialized heads.
That's quite a coordinated effort. What about something more abstract, like a numerical task? You mentioned parity.
Let's take the parity problem, where the LLM needs to determine whether the sum of a sequence of zeros and ones is odd or even.
Okay.
In the ICI stage, a mover head transmits specific information, in this case, the position index from the EOI, the end of input token, to the ND position.
Right.
Then, in the LR stage, an iteration head reads the EOI's position index from the ND position. Its query vector might ask, "Are you position T?" And key vectors respond, "I'm position 2.
Mm-hmm.
This allows it to identify the last digit in the sequence, which, combined with the previously calculated parity state, enables the model to calculate the final parity. It's an iterative process, with heads passing the current state of calculation to the next step.
Amazing. And what about something with more nuanced language understanding, like identifying an indirect object in a sentence? That feels like a complex linguistic challenge.
For an indirect object identification IOI example, like "John bought flowers for Mary," it's a fascinating interplay of many heads. In the KR stage, subject heads and relation heads first focus on entities like Mary and the phrase "bought flowers for," triggering the model to recall that the answer should probably be a human name.
Okay, priming the pump.
Yeah. Then, in the ICI stage, the duplicate head might notice that John appears multiple times, while the name mover head identifies both John and Mary and moves them to the ND position.
Lots of movement.
During iterative ICI and LR stages, the previous head and induction head then work together to specifically attend to John. Finally, all this find information is passed to the inhibition head.
Inhibition, so it stops something.
Exactly. It performs a crucial role. It suppresses the logit value of John, effectively telling a model, "This isn't the correct indirect object." This shows how heads can even collaborate to eliminate incorrect answers.
It's incredible to hear how these individual components, these microprocessors, actually communicate and cooperate to achieve complex results. But how do researchers actually figure out what these tiny components are doing? You can't just, open up an LLM and point at a subject head.
Definitely not.
It must involve some very clever detective work.
Precisely. The research summarizes current experimental methodologies into two main categories, though we'll primarily focus on modeling-free methods, which don't require building new models. These methods typically involve altering a latent state, an internal representation, during the LLM's reasoning process, and then observing the outcome. Often, they use a logit lens.
Logit lens.
Right.
To see the intermediate thoughts.
Essentially, yeah. It's a technique that allows researchers to read the model's intermediate thoughts by mapping its internal numerical states back to human understandable words.
So we're essentially changing something inside the model and then watching what happens, like poking it.
Exactly, controlled poking.
Mm-hmm.
Within these modeling-free methods, we have modification-based methods. These involve subtly altering latent state values while retaining some original information. This is based on the hypothesis that certain concepts are encoded as linear directions in the model's vast internal representation space.
Like adding a specific flavor to its thoughts or nudging it in a particular direction? Is that the idea?
That's a good way to put it. For example, directional addition adds extra information to a component's latent state. Researchers might add a sentiment direction vector to an attention head's activation to see if it then starts summarizing sentiment.
Ah.
Conversely, directional subtraction removes specific information. This helps reveal if other heads can back up or fix the deleted information, showing their redundancy or robustness.
Interesting. And the other main type of modeling-free method, you said there were two.
Those are replacement-based methods.
Right.
Unlike modification, these discard original information in a latent state and replace it entirely.
Okay, more drastic.
Yeah. Zero ablation replaces the latent state with zero vectors, effectively eliminating the head's contribution, just turning it off.
Right.
Similarly, mean ablation replaces the latent state with the mean value across all samples, causing the head to lose its special function, making it average.
That's a very direct way to see the impact. Which one sounds like real detective work, though? You mentioned patching.
Ah, yes, naive activation patching. This one is really powerful. It involves replacing a component's activation, its internal thought, with one from a corrupted prompt.
Corrupted prompt.
For example, if you have the prompt, John and Mary went to the store, and you create a corrupted prompt by changing Mary to Alice,
Okay.
you can then replace the latent state from the original Mary prompt with the one from the Alice prompt at various points in the model. By observing which heads' outputs are most affected, researchers can determine which heads are responsible for focusing on names or other specific behaviors.
So you swap out the thought about Mary with the thought about Alice and see who notices.
Basically, it's like tracing the flow of specific information through the model to pinpoint exactly where certain concepts are processed.
So once we have a hypothesis about what a head does, say from this patching technique, how do we confirm it? How do we prove it's actually doing what we think it's doing?
Evaluation is absolutely key, and it serves two main goals. The first is mechanism exploration evaluation.
Okay.
This uses simplified, often synthesized data sets specifically designed to directly test the working mechanisms of particular attention heads. These data sets simplify the problem difficulty and standardize elements like length and query format, often focusing on token-level answers to make the analysis clearer.
So, for example, if I wanted to test whether a head summarizes sentiment, I'd use a special, maybe artificial data set just for that.
Exactly. For sentiment analysis, researchers created specific data sets like Toy Movie Review and Toy Mood Story with tailored prompt templates. By calculating the activation differences of each head for positive versus negative sentiments using these data sets, they could pinpoint heads that act as potential sentiment summarizers.
Got it.
This type of evaluation is all about isolating a mechanism and proving its function in a controlled environment.
And the second goal of evaluation, what's the other side of the coin?
That's common evaluation. This assesses whether enhancing or suppressing specific heads can actually improve the overall performance of LLMs on broader, more general benchmarks.
So taking it out of the lab and into the real world, sort of.
Exactly. This is where the interpretability research directly connects back to practical LLM improvement. Examples include tasks like multi-choice knowledge reasoning on benchmarks like MMLU, truthfulness using truthful QA, logical reasoning with logic QA, and long context retrieval, like needle in a haystack.
Okay.
It allows researchers to see if their findings about individual heads translate into tangible improvements in the model's overall capabilities. That's the ultimate test of their understanding. Does knowing this actually help us build better models?
This journey into the LLM brain is already so incredibly insightful, showing us layers of complexity most of us never imagined. But what's next? Where do we go from here with this kind of understanding?
Well, this leads us to the emerging concept of machine psychology.
Machine psychology.
Yeah. It seeks to create a unified framework, really connecting LLMs with human cognition, using established psychological paradigms to explore AI's cognitive activities.
So we're essentially applying the tools of human psychology to
Mhm.
understand AI.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing. It's like we're trying to understand if they have their own quirks and thought patterns, just like us.
It is in a way. Researchers are actively exploring how LLMs exhibit human-like cognitive patterns, including heuristics, those mental shortcuts we use,
Right, biases too.
biases, social interactions, learning patterns. This offers a profoundly new lens for understanding and ultimately improving AI by addressing some of those gaps we still see between current LLMs and human cognition. It's less about just making them smarter, maybe, and more about making them think more like us, for better or worse.
Fascinating. And looking ahead, what are some of the key future directions for this interpretability field?
The field is moving fast, but several exciting paths are ahead. One is investigating attention heads in more complex tasks, like truly open-ended question answering, advanced math problems, and scenarios where LLMs use external tools.
Right, when they're not just working internally.
Exactly. Another crucial area is analyzing the robustness of mechanisms against prompt changes, as current LLMs can be very sensitive to slight modifications, sometimes leading to wildly different responses.
That's a big one. Something users notice all the time. Just changing a few words can flip the answer completely.
Precisely. That fragility needs to be understood. Additionally, there is a significant push to develop new experimental methods to test concepts like the indivisibility or universal applicability of certain mechanisms.
Like, does a name mover head always move names no matter what?
Exactly. Are some heads truly universal specialists? The ultimate goal is building a comprehensive interpretability framework that accounts for both the individual and collaborative functioning of all LLM components, not just attention heads.
The whole picture.
The whole picture. And as we discussed, deeply integrating machine psychology will be key to guiding targeted improvements from an anthropomorphic perspective, helping us understand the subtle differences in cognition between LLMs and humans, and perhaps even bridging some of them.
What an incredible deep dive today. We've journeyed deep into the intricate world of LLMs, from the basic mechanics of attention heads and residual streams to this really fascinating four-stage model that parallels human thought.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen how these microscopic components work together, from recalling knowledge and identifying context to performing complex reasoning and meticulously preparing their responses. It's quite something.
It really is. And understanding these internal mechanisms isn't just for researchers. It helps us appreciate the true complexity of these models, anticipate their capabilities, maybe even begin to predict their behaviors sometimes.
Yeah.
It truly offers you, the listener, a powerful shortcut to being well-informed about the AI revolution that's reshaping our world.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a final thought to ponder. As we continue to uncover these cognitive circuits within LLMs, what fundamental limits might we encounter in aligning their reasoning with our own? And, maybe more profoundly, how might this deeper understanding ultimately reshape our very definition of intelligence itself?